It's a common argument by Catholic apologists that the biblical canon, including the Old Testament canon, had developed over several centuries, that it was not known for sure in the first century, to explain away why the Ecumenical Council of Trent passed over certain books that are in Orthodox Bibles, like 3rd and 4th Maccabees, 1st Esdras, and some others. But last week I had called into EWTN's Call to Communion, hosted by Dr. David Anders, who's on Catholic Radio, and I had asked him this question. Unfortunately, he never really answered my question. You can look at the whole thing. It's on, again, EWTN Catholic Radio. It was on August 14th, and it's about at the 32-minute mark. But he did say something interesting. He did actually admit that the Old Testament canon was known by some Christians in the first century, which actually indirectly addresses my question about Trent. So rather than me quote him, I'll just let you hear it for yourself.
That the Catholic Church presently endorses as canonical was recognized by some Christians in the first century. But there was ambiguity in the first century. There were Christian communities with divergent canons. Just as there were Christian communities that had divergent doctrines of Christ, there were competing Christologies, competing ecclesiologies, competing biblical canons. The proper canon was out there, but there were also other versions that were in competition with it. Now,
So if you notice what he actually says, he says that the biblical canon was known by some Christians in the first century. Now, of course, he tries to say that's the same books that are in the Catholic canon today that were affirmed later at the Council of Trent. One, you really can't prove that. You can't prove that it endorsed or they embraced all 7 of the books that are in Catholic Old Testaments that aren't in Protestant Old Testaments, nor can you prove from the first century that they embraced, all the books in the proto-canon, either such as Esther and some others that are in the writings. So he really can't prove that. But the point is that he's actually addressing indirectly my point that if since the Old Testament canon was known by some Christians in the first century, then the Catholic Church can't be part of that, one of those divergent Christian communities that did know what the canon is, because the Council of Trent stated that though they acknowledged certain books from the Old Testament, they weren't sure about other books like 3rd and 4th Maccabees and the others I mentioned that are in Orthodox Bibles. Even as of today, the Magisterium of the Catholic Church does not know whether or not those are inspired scripture and belong in the Bible or not. But I was glad to hear that Dr. Anders, even though he never really addressed my question, he kind of danced around and admitted that the first century church did know whether or not those books were scripture or not, which again demonstrates that the canon of the Catholic Church, the Old Testament canon at least, is not complete, and because they do not know whether those books are scripture and belong in the Old Testament, while the first century church, as admitted by Dr. Anders, did know.